European Buddhists in Siberia. If that sounds strange, you're pretty normal. Typically, these things don't go together. However, for the Tocharians, an ancient and long-lost civilization, they do. To understand this, we need to begin thousands of years ago, to a time just before the Yamnaya civilization reached its peak on the European steppe. The Yamnaya, also known as the Proto-Indo-Europeans, had a bad habit of mass external migration, due in large part to their early access to horses and wagons. They would migrate to many areas in India and Europe, which is why they are called the Proto-Indo-Europeans today. Now, running back the clock to before these groups began to expand, on the eastern edge of the Yamnaya cultural group, one group decides to pick up everything they own and just go east. Not just a little bit east, but a lot bit east. Traveling thousands of miles, this group would go east for generations, leaving nothing but burial mounds to honor their chiefs. Finding a suitably boring steppe area, they would settle down and form the Afantsievo culture, who would kind of just chill on the steppe for a while. Fast forward more than 2,000 years, and these people disappear from the steppe, but turn back up north of the Tian Shan Mountains. Here, a number of things would change in their society, and here we begin to give them the name Tocharian. Growing rich in their new location along the Silk Road, they would adopt many customs foreign to their ancestors. Among the most notable of these are their adoption of Buddhism and writing. The introduction and widespread adoption of Buddhism among the Tocharians would change and morph many aspects of their original culture, thereby changing their language as well. For instance, the typical Indo-European pantheon was dropped and the old gods were forgotten, leaving behind nothing but vague remnants of their pantheon embedded into ordinary words. The Tocharian word Swanko likely carries a morphological reference to the Indo-European sun goddess. Other morphemes such as men reference a long-lost lunar deity. Most significantly for us is their usage of writing. With successful translations only beginning in the early 1900s, the Tocharian script was long a mystery. The translation breakthrough came when scholars realized that the Tocharians wrote in a script adapted from similar writing systems used in much of India. This allowed for relatively easy decipherment as the phonetic values of the text could be accurately inferred. Additionally, most Tocharian texts are simply translation of Buddhist texts written in Sanskrit, a language that is already known and understood. These two things allowed translation efforts to rapidly progress, and soon it became clear that Tocharian was an Indo-European language, lost for more than 1,000 years. Tocharian is found in two major dialects, which are significantly different from each other to the point where they could be considered two different languages. The first variety, Tokarian A, is found in the northeasternmost area of the Tocharian languages. This language is interesting for a number of reasons. It was used exclusively in writing as a liturgical language. This means that it was used for religious purposes. Unlike most liturgical languages, like Latin in the Catholic Church, Tokarian A was not a precursor to the common vernacular spoken by everyday people. Tokarian A was actually the opposite, being more innovative than its neighboring dialect of Tokarian B. That being said, Tokarian B was a language of the people, with texts found in a number of different genres and being found throughout the entire Tokarian-speaking area. Tokarian B is notable for its comparative grammatical conservatism in contrast with Tokarian A. However, when analyzing innovations in both languages, it is clear that both sprung from a common ancestor, not one preceding the other. Take, for example, the Tokarian A word want, and the Tokarian B word yente. Both cognate with English wind. Neither could have produced the other with expected sound shifts. Old Tokarian A would not have replaced W with Y or added an extra E at the end, and the old Tokarian B could not have replaced Y with W. These sound shifts are so rare they would not have happened. Instead, and much more plausibly, a Proto-Tokarian language with the word yente produced both want and yente in its descendants. A third Tokarian language, Tokarian C, has been theorized based on potential loanwords found in the ancient Gandhari language. The theory states that words of Tokarian origin appear in Gandhari texts but do not match sound shifts expected from these loans. When languages loan words, they take them into their language as unchanged as possible. However, the sound shifts of Tokarian words in Gandhari do not match the sound changes that would be expected from a simple loan. Therefore, there must be another medium that these words pass through before reaching Gandhari. Tokarian C is theorized to be this medium, with its unknown sound shifts affecting the words being loaned into Gandhari. Take, for example, the Gandhari word anklatsa, which is borrowed from Tokarian. Part of this word matches what would be expected from Proto-Tokarian in its first syllable, but other sound changes do not match. Therefore, a third Tokarian language, preserving the first N but changing the second N to an L, would account for this discrepancy. Unfortunately, as is a problem often encountered with antiquities in this region, is that there is simply not enough evidence to know for sure if this is what happened. There are only a handful of proposed cognate words, not nearly enough to prove a complete new branch. Until new evidence surfaces, we can only guess if the Tokarian C branch really existed or not. Being along the Silk Road, the Tocharians were always in contact with other groups. Because of their strategically important location, they were often subjugated by more powerful neighbors. First, the Tang dynasty would enter into the region and begin conquests. Suvarnadeva, the king of Kucha, a Tokarian city, would align himself against the Tang. This would ultimately prove to be a mistake, and he would be defeated. This led to a long series of conflicts for the throne that would leave thousands of Tokarians dead. Later, the region would be overrun by the Tibetan Empire, where they would clash with the Tang. Then, the Uyghur Cognate came through the region and conquered it for themselves. Here, in the Tarim Basin, they would remain. After centuries of cultural domination by other groups, the Tocharians would ultimately assimilate with the Uyghurs and begin to speak the Old Uyghur language. Here, around 800 to 900 AD, the Tocharians would disappear forever. Today, there is nothing left of the Tocharians except for the tattered remnants of their culture upon the land and a few scattered loanwords in neighboring languages. There remains in the Tarim Basin only a large set of caves which honor their Buddhist tradition. The walls inside these caves were painted depicting significant Buddhists and Tocharians. They give us a fleeting glimpse of their ancient culture and leave us to wonder what life was really like for the people who spent their lives painting these caves. In addition to these physical remains of their presence in this region, are also loanwords that appear in modern languages. A couple of words relating to Buddhist monks survive in Chinese. The Tocharians also introduced the term for relay horse to Chinese, which recalls the ancient origin of the Tocharians on the European steppe, where they were skilled in their use of horses. Another, and perhaps the most intriguing, was the introduction of the word for honey, mi, to Chinese. In ancient Chinese, it would have pronounced something like meat, from Tokarian meat. From Proto-Indo-European, medu, cognate with English mead, an alcohol made from fermented honey, in Greek methu, Sanskrit madhu, and Russian miod. This word would also spread from Tocharian into other neighboring languages, producing Japanese mitsu, Vietnamese mat, and Uyghur mir. In their location along the Silk Road, the Tocharians would leave lasting remnants in the languages and cultures that they would come into contact with. Today, the legacy of the Tocharians is easy to miss, but it remains nonetheless.